When we left Eskumenak Harbor in the Maritimes, we had our first encounter with the maritime fishing fleet. At first we thought they were laying long nets across our path and we weren't sure how to get across them. Later we thought that they were crab pots, and then later we learned they were lobster pots. Sailing in the ocean so far, we were used to having fishing boats around us, but they had never interfered with our sailing before. But we had arrived in the Canadian Maritimes during lobster season. Michelle was the one at the helm when we had our first encounter, and it sort of confused us.
There's a wall of net there. We're following it. I don't know what's the depth of those nets there. So I'm going towards shore. I'm gonna have the information from one of the fishermen. But basically what we're doing, following the line of net, fishing net, then we're going to turn. Because we don't know how depth, what's it deep, is it 10 feet, 20 feet? Because here it's only 43 feet of water.
From our experience sailing in the Great Lakes, whenever we saw a line of buoys like this, it meant that there was a fishing net suspended between 6 feet and 10 feet below the buoys. At least conditions were calm as we puzzled over this long line of buoys in a row blocking our path. The fishermen are laying their nets in shallow water and close to shore, blocking our ability to get out into deeper waters. So as far as we understood, this fisherman had just chosen to lay his nets sort of close to shore because maybe that's where the fish were. But it was in our way. As Michelle drove parallel to the line of buoys, I decided to get on the VHF and try to call the captain to see how deep was his fishing nets. Imagine our puzzlement when he replied that it's not a net, they're pots. So we cut across them and continued on our way. We still didn't know they were lobster pots and had assumed them to be crab pots for quite a while. We're trying to get into the harbor entrance, but these crab fishermen, they essentially mined it with crab pots freaking everywhere. So they don't give a crap. They put them wherever they want. I mean, we're inside the buoys. Like the marked channel to get in is right there. And they just drop their crab pots anywhere as they want. The whole way ahead in the marked channel is filled with crab pots. It can actually be very stressful as one person has to man the helm, the other person has to be up on deck for an extra set of eyes to try to spot the pots and give course corrections to the person at the helm. Doing this for 8 or 10 hours straight really takes the fun out of sailing. And so began the misery of slaloming our 40-foot sailboat through lobster pot hell. Well, this is something new. Apparently we're in a lobster fishing ground. Michelle almost has to slalom the boat around all the different buoys and lobster traps that are basically everywhere.
We have to do variation by port 10 degrees, starboard 10 degrees, 5 degrees.
For those of you who've never had the pleasure, imagine sailing for hundreds of miles through thousands and thousands of crab pots in string after string after string. When you sail a boat, you set your course and your sails relative to wind angle. When you constantly have to vary your wind angle by plus or minus 10 degrees, and you're constantly retrimming your sails, bleeding off speed, unable to get further into the wind, to make this crazy zigzag course through the minefield, it gets very frustrating and it wears you down. Why WildChild is amazing. Okay, so what's the big deal about these floating buoys? So the thing is, the floating buoys have ropes attached to them, and the ropes go down to a lobster pot. These ropes are very bad for your sailboat. On the surface, you'll see two buoys close together, and there's a rope strung between them. This is so the fishermen can hook and retrieve the lines. Sometimes when the wind is blowing, the rope, it can actually be laying horizontal along the surface of the water, making the trap even worse. If you're sailing along and you get too close to one of these buoys and the line gets to your keel, it slides down the front of your keel, up the back of the keel because it's being pulled up by the buoy. And if your propeller's running, it's going to tie up your propeller, possibly cause damage to your transmission. Even if you're just sailing, the risk is, what if it gets tangled between the rudder and the rudder post? If you get tangled, this means somebody's going swimming with a knife. Maybe the water's not very warm, maybe you're sailing at night, maybe you're sailing in 6-foot waves, maybe you're sailing in 25 knots of wind. No matter what the situation, it's not going to be a fun time for whoever has to go cut you free. As we sailed through the Northumberland Strait, we were pretty frustrated by all this, but at least in Canada there is a lobster season, and the fishermen seem to follow rules. They're more organized, they lay their strings in a line, they don't lay them too close together. Later when we get to the coast of Maine, it's just chaos. They don't seem to have any rules whatsoever. With lobster traps everywhere and completely unmarked on any chart plotter or any other way to detect them, it's almost like sailing through a slalom course. In the US, there is no specific lobster season. They can do this all year round. They also don't seem to have many rules governing them. In Maine, we found lobster pots in mooring fields, beside fuel docks, in marina entrances, in every bay and channel, and sometimes as close together as 10 feet apart. Sailing conditions are good, so we slalom our sailboat around all the randomly placed buoys. At least fishing nets are always in a straight line. Lobster traps or crab traps, whatever they are just randomly placed everywhere. So despite the difficulties of sailing through lobster pot hell in the Northumberland Strait, we did eventually make our way to PEI.
First stop here, and we're going to the
There's our hero sailing out of the Summerside Yacht Club under Spinnaker. How fabulous is that? We love this guy. And one of the pieces of the story that I want to make sure that we don't gloss over is how amazing the people of Prince Edward Island are. It is small town Canada. It is so friendly and kind. We had absolute strangers offering us use of their car, offering to give us rides places, offering local advice, offering help, people waiting with lines, people just stopping by and chatting like long lost friends.
I just started here, so I'm a learner.
Don't worry, we're back there, we're good.
Don't I hit you much yet?
Hold it back in, pull it in.
Probably move. Why don't we move your center up to this fleet here? That way we're putting away from everything.
Yeah.
We're gonna pull it up this way, Terry. We're gonna pull it up.
Okay.
This was our first time tying up to a marina since Quebec City. It had been a long time. We were tied safely to a dock. We were at a yacht club. We had access to internet, showers, and laundry facilities. We had wonderful people in fair weather. It was actually a really nice time.
Yeah, that way we'll have the center there. So that's good enough. That should do it there. Good. Okay. Hillsborough River. Oh yeah, you got it. Like you got St. Peter's Island is out on the street, and then you got to go in behind the island, and you got to go all the way up to the Hillsborough River, and then into Charlottetown. So you got Charlottetown Marina, Charlottetown Yacht Club, Charlottetown Marina, and Peaks Key. Those are the three marinas. But like I say, they're tight.
Would there happen to be internet access, Wi-Fi?
Wi-Fi for here is breakwater, and I think unless they changed, it was guest. I'm not sure. The bartender will give you that anyway. See, I have it on. Mine's automatic, so I don't know what the password is. But yeah, you got.
This fabulous man, absolute stranger, helped us land our boat, spent half an hour giving us local information, came back the next day to offer us a ride to get groceries. And the people of PEI are just like this. So on our limited budget, we could only afford the one night at the yacht club. The first night we stayed there, the next day ran around, did all our errands. Then at night, the second night, we left to go to anchor outside the breakwall. And early the next morning, the crew of WildChild woke up to leave Summerside and head our way to Charlottetown, PEI.